Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Cover to Cover. You're here with Mo,
Andrea,
and Morgan.
And today we want to talk about the quest for the Yeti. John Steinbeck, Sherlock Holmes, and more. Plus we have a top 10 list for you today, so stay tuned for that at the end of the show. But first, we want to discuss using literature to teach others about subjects that they may not understand.
Children have long used books as tools to help shape their vision and understanding of the world, and the Ottawa Public Library has opened up an easy access avenue for helping readers of all ages to understand the LGBTQ community. They've curated 6 different sets of book lists to broaden the horizon of readers, and have, as we've mentioned before, that there's a great benefit of reading because the way it impacts our ability to be empathetic, and it can also teach us about other cultures and communities that we might not understand. So this is just another great resource for parents and children to use to educate their children. But what do y'all guys think?
So I feel strongly about this. I earned my concentration in education, and I volunteered at daycares and worked in classrooms as a teacher's assistant. I mentored kids at the Boys and Girls Club. And in my experience, I've seen that kids just have purity and love and so much innocence. And I also learned in some of my education courses about how our mental molds affect children and rub off on them. So whether or not you support the LGBTQ community, it's not right to teach kids to judge. And so it's time we start working toward accepting people. And I know acceptance is kind of a strong word for a lot of people when it comes to this topic. So what I'm talking about is just not judging, but instead treating people like human beings. You know, we did this a couple decades ago with an enormous community in the United States, and we are still doing this today by invalidating and stifling their voices when they try to speak up about their hurt, their trials, and their tribulations that many on the other side will never understand. So I think it's great that we're starting to instill the idea of community into our next generation. And yes, community means acceptance.
Absolutely. I think obviously that's a great point, and that we do have this tradition of passing along our values to our children, and sometimes if our values are really judgmental, we just need to keep in mind that we shouldn't put all of our values on our children. Let them make their own choices about some things. And you know, young people need to keep in mind too that they don't have to inherit the prejudices of their parents or their grandparents, right? Like just because your dad said this person's bad or this organization or this group of people, that doesn't mean that that's what you have to believe. You need to take it upon yourself to investigate and discover.
Yeah, I mean, we should definitely keep just that purity and that innocence of kids, because, I mean, when you're stifling them and keeping them away from certain communities, you're teaching them something. You know, I went to a lot of Christian schools and religious schools, and I was taught a lot of things. And then when I went to public school and I was, you know, in a theater program, I didn't know how to, you know, communicate with people. I didn't know what to think or what to believe. And so it was hard for me because I'd grown up with certain mental molds my whole life. And once I got to know those people, things changed. And I think, you know, opening up community and loving everyone is so important, because once you really get to know a person, that's when you can see their experiences and what they're really going through. But if you're teaching people to hate people that they don't know, that's easy, but it's so much easier to love someone when you know them. So I'm just very pro opening up community.
Unfortunately, my fear is that they're putting together this great list, or 6 different lists, and what's going to happen is when children, I mean, children who are young, their parents are going to give them what they want to give them, and really, I wouldn't say control what they read or what they have access to, but that's what parents do to guard their children. So, but I know, because I have many friends out there that are constantly looking for great resources for their children, to teach their children. So I think this is great for those who are open to providing things for their children to really help broaden their horizons and shape their thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another issue that we're facing is the fact that some parents are putting enormous pressure on their kids to be what they imagine and make them feel like they would be loved less if they weren't the football star or, you know, the ballerina based on gender roles and mental molds that they haven't broken themselves. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think exposure is the key, what you guys are saying. Like, give them this literature that exposes them to things that they may not be familiar with, right? Because if their parents aren't friends with those kind of people, or they just don't experience a lot of that, literature is a great way to open children's minds to just the multitude of culture out there, right?
Yep.
Morgan, you've spent a lot of time in different cultures, and it's great to expose kids to that.
Yeah. If you don't have the luxury or the ability to travel, like traveling the world really changes your perspective, you can do it through a book.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a great way to expose yourself and your children to different cultures and ideas and other things as well.
We've talked a lot about how books open up forums to talk with your kids, and so I think this is no exception.
Absolutely. And just to note a couple of books I did recommend for children. They recommended Heather Has Two Mommies, and another book, Who Are You? The Kid's Guide to Gender Identity. So those are just two great options. Check out those lists for further information. And speaking of things that can be misunderstood, the world has been enamored over the concept of the Yeti since 1951, when British explorer Eric Shipton took a picture of a giant footprint with a thumb as he tried to find an alternate route up Mount Everest.
The subject has spawned books and shows and mass speculation since then.
One Yeti fanatic, author Daniel Taylor, opened up in a recent interview with the National Geographic about his 60-year search for the Yeti in regions of Nepal. He wrote a book about the quest and the fascination called Yeti, the Ecology of a Mystery. His research has led him to believe that the original Yeti footprint is that of a tree bear indigenous to the area of Nepal. He also helped create a national park in the area he researched most, the Barren Valley. Taylor's final thoughts on the Yeti are that the myth is of great importance around the world, and he believes that the deep mystery at the core of humanity is that we want to be connected to the great beyond, and that's what the Yeti is for many of us.
Yeah. So I have a confession to make. Anytime I stay in a hotel or somewhere that has cable, like the first thing I search for is a show about some paranormal phenomenon. And if it's a whole show about the Yeti, I am there for it.
I definitely want the Yeti to be real. I want the Loch Ness Monster to be real. I want unicorns to be real. And I will say I believe in all of them because I want all of the fairies to stay alive and not die. So I believe in everything.
Morgan? Do you think it's like too much, or are you like into people who are searching for Yetis?
I'm not really into it. Sorry. I mean, sometimes I'll look at those posts that show really weird animals, and then they have like a gotcha, this like the hook one, like here's this unicorn, and then it was a trick, you know, just to get you to click, and then but you do see these really weird animals, but I have a really active imagination, so I don't even want to think about it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but I'm definitely taking you on the next hunt for Bigfoot with me. So.
I know. That's we should do that as team building. We're going to go hunt for Bigfoot.
We, when I was a child, we went snipe hunting. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Oh, yeah. I remember in Girl Scouts, we're like, yeah, we're going to go snipe hunting, and we're walking around in the woods with our flashlight. Snipes are not a real thing.
Okay.
Okay.
But
kind of like a chupacabra or something?
yeah.
No, that's real.
But it was just a silly thing, and people got scared, and yeah. So it's like
I don't know. That sounds fun to me.
But one time I was out with my dogs, and we have some woods near where I take them out, and it was probably like 4:35 a.m. in the morning, and I saw these two eyes, and we've had warnings that there's coyotes.
Oh, yeah.
And I was terrified, and I grabbed my dogs, and I'm running down the hill, and I tripped on my way down.
Oh, no.
It was probably just a cat because someone put up a lost cat sign. But
or maybe it was a Yeti.
Or
We'll
maybe
never
it was.
know.
But I don't want to think about it because my imagination will go wild. So
Okay.
I just stay away.
Well, I'm going to discover the Yeti, but like the friendly Yeti, and introduce you, and then all your fears will go away.
Yeah, there we go.
So, and I really love when they incorporate things like the Yeti and the Loch Ness Monster and things like that into literature. And one recommendation I can give for young readers is a book that was one of my favorites as a kid called The Boggart and the Monster, and it was about the Loch Ness Monster by Susan Cooper. There's a whole series on it, so check it out if you love things that may or may not exist.
Well, let us know in the comments what you think about Yetis. Or you can just talk about Yeti coffee cups and coolers and things like that as well, like me. Or other popular myths and legends. And if they have been the center of some of your favorite books, or if you're like me, you're like, I want to stay away. But right now, we're going to take a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to talk more about authors and a top 10 list. So we'll see you in just a moment.
John Steinbeck is a well-known author from the 20th century. Some of his pivotal works include The Grapes of Wrath and East of Eden. Right now, he is trending in the news as there is one man out there that's hoping to revitalize the way that we look at Steinbeck.
Some feel Steinbeck's works are falling out of prominence with younger generations, and that his themes are being touted as overly simplistic and his works as middle-brow. But Gavin Jones, professor of English at Stanford University, is spearheading a revival of Steinbeck with a new course he has launched in American Studies called Steinbeck and the Environments. Jones is urging scholars and students to take a more critical look at his works, and in the class, students will focus on the social and political context of Steinbeck's major works and more on his personal life and influences.
So Steinbeck, for me, is one of those authors that I have not read a ton of, but have meant to, right, over time. I did read Of Mice and Men, which is actually not a full-length novel, which kind of blew my mind when I read that. It's actually like a miniature novel. It's only like 90 pages long.
Yeah.
So sad to say that's all I've read, but East of Eden is on my list. It's got a little bit of everything, including 1,000 pages, so I'm going to get there eventually.
When? Your list is pretty long.
I know. It's been there for a minute. But have you guys read anything, or are you like me?
It's been such a long time.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
Well, you guys can come over and we can all read Of Mice and Men together this weekend since it's so short and we can have a little reading time.
Well, I am excited to see revamping happen because it sounds like we could all use a little more Steinbeck.
Yeah.
And one fandom that doesn't really need any more help because it's still going strong is the Sherlock Holmes series. Lovers of Holmes and Watson can rejoice because there is a new book out for them.
Author Matthias Bostrom has written a book to help detail and explain the rise of Sherlock Holmes and Watson in our pop culture zeitgeist. His book, From Holmes to Sherlock, the story of the men and women who created an icon, focuses on the origins and the hype surrounding Holmes' rise to icon status. And it is a fascinating thing to see our obsessions take off, don't you think?
Yeah, so we talked about this before. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle didn't even really care about Sherlock and was not into how it grew legs and took off, but we were like, sorry, we don't care, we love it, and now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I love how he's just like, I'm kind of done with this, and people are like, no!
Yeah, he's like, I killed him. Oh, you want him back? He's alive again.
Oh, man, can you imagine, like, what he would think if he saw all of the things that came out of Sherlock Holmes?
I think he would think, man, look how rich I am.
That's true. Well, one thing Sherlock was good at giving us was giving us heroes to root for and villains to hate. And villains are an integral part of many of our favorite stories. So today we have a top 10 video for you counting down the best villains in literature. So enjoy.
Here are our top 10 villains in literature.
Number 10, Hannibal Lecter. Hannibal has the ability to draw you in and get you to trust him. He is a brilliant, well-groomed, sophisticated sociopath/serial killer who suffered a traumatic childhood after seeing his beloved sister murdered and cannibalized. Lecter often kills victims with bad manners. Thomas Harris's creepy villain is sure to keep you up at night.
Number 9, Satan, as seen in Paradise Lost. While Satan may be the biggest villain of all time, Milton victimizes him just a bit in comparison to his character, God. Maybe God is a tyrant, or maybe that's what Satan would want you to think. Milton's Paradise Lost exemplifies classic villainy and good versus evil.
Number 8, Norman Bates' Psycho. Talk about having a dark childhood. Robert Bloch's character Norman Bates is messed up in a lot of ways. After committing crimes, he becomes disassociated with reality to deal with what he's done. The new reality he has created for himself does not benefit others and wrangles in innocent strangers along the way. Bates will make you think twice before stopping at a hotel along the highway.
Number 7, Annie Wilkes from Misery. For every author out there, one hopes to never find a superfan to rival Annie Wilkes. Stephen King's Misery takes the reader on a journey to places they never wanted to go. Annie knows what she wants and she plans to get it. If you're feeling fed up with your authors, well, Annie's got a plan.
Number 6, Wicked Witch of the West from Wizard of Oz. The Wicked Witch manifested fear across the land and had it working for her with minions and slaves to do her dirty work. That is until Dorothy shows up. She lets greed get the best of her when she sets eyes on Dorothy's slippers, which once belonged to her sister, the Wicked Witch of the East. L. Frank Baum's classic, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, gives us an amazing, misunderstood villain for the ages.
Number 5, Grendel from Beowulf. Grendel is almost like that cranky guy who always makes noise complaints about the annoying parties next door, but instead of calling someone out to take care of the noise, he just slaughters them and eats them.
Number 4, Cersei Lannister, Game of Thrones. At every turn in Game of Thrones, there are villains abounding, but one really tops the crazy charts. Cersei Lannister. She lets nothing stand in her way on her quest for power. One-track minded with masterful plans, she is always one step ahead and ruling her kingdom with a vicious and watchful eye. Check out her handiwork in George R.R. Martin's Song of Ice and Fire.
Number 3, Professor Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes never imagined there could be an individual to match his wit and intellect until he met Professor Moriarty. Moriarty is known as the Napoleon of crime. Brought to life by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the character has flourished over the years and blossomed into Holmes' nemesis.
Number 2, Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter. He who must not be named is feared widely for his destruction and lack of moral compass. Lord Voldemort emerged from a broken life and a fear of death and takes on the wizarding world with a wand and a mind of destruction. Catch him in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and follow his story until the very end.
And our number 1 villain, Sauron from The Lord of the Rings. Do you ever feel like there's an ever watchful eye gazing upon you, tracking your every move and bringing destruction upon the land? Then you might be in Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Sauron is the master of darkness, seeking the one ring to rule them all, and he will stop at nothing. This haunting villain has inspired generations of fantasy evil and will continue to do so.
So there you have it. Those are the top 10 villains in literature.
All right, we hope you enjoy our top 10 list. We will be sure to keep those coming for you. And if we were to do a top 10 detectives list, we might have to include Professor Dahlia Cohen-Gross, who is using some literary detective skills right now.
Dahlia Cohen-Gross is on the mission to retrieve 100 books that were published under her father's publishing house, the Israeli Library, before he was killed in 1956. Her mother didn't save any copies of the works he produced, so it has become her mission to track them down. She has had much success in tracking down copies of 75% of his works, but is still looking for the others. Her father's name was Yosef Cohen, and Dahlia urges any book collectors or enthusiasts who might have information to reach out to her. So we will link that article that we read in the description down below, and you can find her contact information.
I think this is so sweet that she's taking it upon herself to track down every, just a copy of all of these books so she has this tie to him.
Yeah, it's crazy she doesn't have all the copies. Like the wife didn't keep any?
Well, there was a lot of war and stuff, and I think their house maybe was rubble. I don't know. And after he was killed, they had to move away, and her mom had to get a job, and life is hard for a single mother in the 1950s. Yeah.
Well, let us know in the comments what you think about that, and don't forget to check out that link in the show, and let us know what you think about our top 10 list, and even what kind of top 10s you would like to see. Well, we're so excited it's the weekend. Also, let us know what you're reading so we can add it to our TBR list, and don't forget to share this post and then send us a message for a free t-shirt if you'd like one. Send us a message with your size, mailing address, and your preferred style. We have both V-neck and crew neck.
All right, and thank you again so much for joining us. We do hope that you have a great weekend. I'm Mo.
I'm Andrea.
And I'm Morgan.
And we will, of course, be back on Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central Time. So until then, keep reading, writing, and being awesome. I know we will. Bye.
Bye.